What's up everybody, back with another raid guide, and today we're taking a look at normal/heroic prototype Pantheon. Now keep in mind that this is PTR raid testing, so some things can change once this hits live. Now the prototype Pantheon 3-stage fight where you fight 4 different bosses. At the start of the fight you fight War and Duty. When either of them reaches 50%, phase 2 starts. Currently active bosses hops away and Renewal and Absolution spawns instead. When either of those reach 50%, phase 3 starts and you fight all 4 at the same time. So naturally you want all bosses as close to 50% as possible so you don't transition with one boss at 70 and one at 50%, as you'll be fighting all 4 in phase 3. Now let's go over their abilities instead. Now Prototype of War spawns several ritualists around the room. These adds channel and expand a ring of necrosis that starts in the center of the room and eventually cover the entire room. Standing in the necrosis makes you healing immune and you take a ton of damage. And Prototype of War will also spam cast Gloom Bolt, which deals a ton of damage and leaves a healing absorb. It can and should be interrupted. Now lastly, War will mark 2 players with Death Touch, which deals ticking damage over 30 seconds, and upon removal the player explodes, dealing lethal damage to him or herself as well as anyone within 8 yards of that player. On top of this debuff will then jump to a nearby player. To avoid this, players targeted by Death's Touch needs to be dispelled while standing in a Bastion's ward, which is just a bubble on the ground that Prototype of Duty spawns, or rather Decurions that Duty spawns. And once a player gets dispelled in a ward, that ward will despawn. So get Death Touch, run into bubble, get dispelled. So what else can Duty do? Apart from the Bastion wards, Duty will also use Humbling Strikes on the active tank, which deals a ton of damage, increases damage taken by Humbling Strikes by 100%, and 30% of damage taken by this strikes radiates to all other players as physical damage. So tank swap on each strike to keep raid damage low and pop a cooldown before it gets smacked. Lastly, every now and then Duty will fly up into the air to the edge of the platform and spam Pinning Volley, which pushes you back away from the boss and also spawns tons of swirls and spears on the ground. If you get hit by one, you get trapped or pinned, and players will need to nuke down that spear to free the player. Raid also takes a ton of ticking damage during this, and melee will have a hard time hitting Duty during this. Now in phase 2 you get Prototype of Renewal and Absolution. Renewal will spam cast Anima Bolt, deals damage to a random player and inflicts a dot. This is interruptible. But the big thing is the Withering Seeds. She will spawn a few seeds near the center of the room. If these are healed to full health, they bloom, which instantly heals the entire raid and increases healing done for all players by 25%, and it lasts for 30 seconds and it stacks. On top of this, new applications of this buff refreshes the duration. However, these seeds also lose HP all the time, and if they die they'll wither, which instead deals damage to everyone in the raid and applies a stacking dot that lasts for 16 seconds. So make sure seeds don't die, and if possible try and heal them up in a staggered fashion to keep the healing buff for as long as possible. Healing up the second seed a few seconds before the first buff drops so you can just extend it. On top of this, boss will spawn herds of wild beasts that march across the room. Get hit, take damage, and you get knocked back. Avoid pesky animals. And lastly, Anima Storm summons a bunch of anime storms or tornadoes that deals damage and silences players hit by them. Now for the Prototype of Absolution, which is Mr. Sire Denathrius, uses a lot of the abilities we've all grown to know and love over the course of an entire raid at the start of the expansion, such as Hand of Destruction, pulls all players to him and after 6 seconds does a smash, dealing raid-wide damage, which is then reduced by distance. However, this usually overlaps with his new-ish ability, which is Sinful Projection, which works kinda like the Prideful mob from the seasonal affix. Prideful targets everyone in the raid, and after 4 seconds they fire off 4 projectiles from them. If you get hit by one of these, you take some damage, you get stunned for 2 seconds, and you get a stack of Burden of Sin, another returning ability. In this version though, it's just an infinitely stacking dot that lasts forever. And lastly, there's Racking Pain, which deals a big chunk of damage to players and ritualists hit by it, as well as increases their damage taken by 25%. So just like on Sire, if adds are up or ritualists, you can chunk them with Racking stacking pain. Although I wouldn't go out of my way to line this up on normal and heroic, it seems to be more of a mythic thing. But you can if you want. And once one of these hits 50%, phase 3 starts, you fight all 4 bosses at the same time, and this is of course where you want to bloodlust. Luckily though, they don't use all of their big abilities at the same time, but there will be some sketchy overlaps for sure here. But on normal and heroic, they kinda just cycled through the abilities one after one, so you might get Ritualist spawning, then 20 seconds after you get Seeds, then 20 seconds after that you get gripped by Hand of Destruction, etc, etc. So it's going to end a bit of a dance in the end, unless they change a ton of things about the fight, which I doubt. Biggest focus should always be on the Ritualists whenever they spawn. They aren't difficult by any means, but if left alone for too long, you can't be healed and you just die. There's no recovery. The rest of the mechanics are just dodging really. Anima Storms, dodge, Wild Beast, dodge, Pinning Volley, dodge, perhaps use a Roar or Wind Rush if it overlaps with something as it pushes you back. Seeds, just heal forehead, and whenever you get gripped by Sire, you spread for the sinful projection and dance away. One last important piece of information, on heroic, all 4 bosses needs to die within 20 seconds of the first one dying. On normal though, you can just blast away carefree, kill whichever one you find most annoying, probably Prototype of War. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's PTR, so some things can change, but I highly doubt it'll be any big changes. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments or become a patron and get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can find Raid Week chorus notes and a ton of helpful people for all your progression needs. It's also the fastest way to get a hold of me. I'm streaming all raid progression on Thursdays and Sundays, and I play with a Swedish guild now for progression, so streams will be a bit Swinglish. Now don't forget the usual YouTubey stuff, subscribe, like, comment, and do ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.